este meetup que hemos montado también con otros meetups amigos. Bueno, es un placer estar con vosotros y también tener a Melissa Perri, que nos va a hablar del Escape de Bill Trap, de su libro. Y bueno, esperamos que sea un tema interesante. Es uno de los mejores libros que hay en el mundo sobre Product Management, muy accesible de entrar y también muy poderoso. Te ayuda a ver tanto las dimensiones organizativas como de alineamiento de estrategia. Muchos temas que tiene interesantes y además tiene un registro bastante accesible. Con lo cual, bueno, luego al final hablaremos un poquito del libro en cuestión y bueno, ahora le voy a pasar el testigo a Melissa. Melissa, thanks a lot for being with us, and it's all yours.
All right. Hi, everybody. It's very nice to meet you, and it's nice to be here. I was just in Spain. What was it, like 2 months ago, Alex? It wasn't that long ago. So I'm excited to be back. But I am going to talk to you a little bit about the Bill Trap today. So we're going to do a little talk, but I do want to let you know that Alex has graciously translated the book into Spanish. So we now have a Spanish version of Escaping the Bill Trap, which is available on Amazon. I also discounted it for this webinar today, so you can go grab it from there. But I hope you enjoy it. So without further ado, I'm going to do this about 30 minutes of this presentation on Escaping the Bill Trap. And then I'm going to open it up for questions. So if you have any questions for me, please pop them in the meeting chat. I love to answer anything that you have, been wondering about, but no question is too big or small, and it can be very specific to your situation. That's fine. We'll talk about it. So please post it in the chat as we go, and then we will jump right in. All right, let me get this set up with our PowerPoint. Share the screen. This one. All right, cool. All right, so I'm going to talk to you today about what the Bill Trap is and how we can actually get out of it. But before I dive into that, I do have to tell you how I learned about the Bill Trap and how I got into it. And I'll tell you a little bit about how I got out of it as well. So when I was first starting in product management, I didn't really know what it was. I very much fell into this profession like a lot of us out there. And I had been studying engineering in school. I had been doing a lot of graphic design work. And when I was looking for a job, my friend went to work for a company called Capital IQ, and it was a software company on Wall Street. And I said, I really don't want to be a software developer, although I can code. I don't know what to do. And the person who was hiring there said, hey, I think I can teach you to be a product manager. And I said, all right, what is that? What is that role? And he explained to me that the role of a product manager was really the person who went to the sales team and collected all of the requirements for the customers and then put them into wonderful specification documents and then shipped them off to the engineers and let them build it. So I got to work doing that. And I got really, really good at writing these specification documents. I found one from early days that was 21 pages long for changing your password. So when I tell you that I was very detailed at this and really good at looking at requirements, I mean, I was very good. And I was told that I was an awesome product manager because all of my specification documents were so detailed, so perfect with all my photoshopped images of where everything needs to go that I never had to talk to the developers. So I was like, okay, I got this. Everybody's telling me I'm doing such a great job. This is it. This is what I meant to do. So after that, I actually did a little stint as a developer for a little bit at Barclays, realized I hated software developing myself. I was not good at it. And I went back into product management there. And after I left the bank, I went to a startup. And I went to the startup because the CTO of Capital IQ had gone there. He said, come over and do what you did for me at Capital IQ, do it here at this e-commerce startup. So I said, okay. And I was working with this team of 8 developers who were based in Nashville, and I got to work. We were doing all the back-end systems of this e-commerce site, and I started speccing out. I was like, we need to build this, we need to build that, asking people what they need to actually put into the back-end systems, all those things. So after my first month, I had written about a 35-page specification document again, sent it off to my developers in Nashville. 3 weeks later, they came back and they said, okay, it's done. Here you go. Go look at it. And I looked at it and I was like, guys, this isn't what I specified at all. Like, none of the things I put in that document are actually on here. Like, what did you do? Did you even read it? And they go, oh, that thing? Yeah, no, we didn't read that. Are you kidding me? I'm not reading like 45 pages of what you want me to build. I just built what I thought we needed to build. So now I'm having a crisis. Now I'm like, if people aren't reading my specification documents, what am I supposed to do? Right? Like, how am I supposed to be a product manager? So we start fighting. And I'm like, you have to read my documents. And the developers are like, no. And we're not building anything. And we just hate each other and things are not good. So one point, one of the developers, his name was Jared, he goes, hey, I was actually not just brought in here to be a developer, but also because I know this thing called Agile. So why don't we lose the specification documents and then start doing this thing called Scrum? And at this point, nothing was working. We couldn't get anything out the door. And we said, okay, whatever. If this makes us work better together, we're willing to try it. So he introduced us to a very lightweight version of Scrum. And, as the product manager, I didn't even know the word product owner actually existed for a very long time, but I was the person in charge of the product backlog. We started breaking down things into user stories. We started actually talking about the work we wanted to build. We broke them out into 2-week sprints. And we found out that it worked really, really well for us. So we didn't have really hard and fast rules about how we did this. We just got better at collaborating. We got better at actually doing the work together. And we started to really become a powerful team. And everybody in the organization started to look at us and go, wow, like, what are you guys doing? You're shipping so many things. You're working really well together. And we found out that we actually really liked each other too, when we stopped yelling at each other. So things were really, really good. So we're cruising. We're like one of the best teams that we have in the organization, and we're getting the harder and the harder work. So at one point, the CEO comes up to us and says, hey, I want you to build this portal for all of our sellers. We were kind of like an Etsy where we had like celebrity sellers out there picking out products, but we sourced them and then sold them. And he said, we need these celebrity sellers and these people to be able to manage this stuff like a business. I want them to be able to say, we should be selling this and I need to promote this. And this is how much money I'm making, all that stuff. And it was because we had nothing really for them to run their business at the time. Nothing existed. We didn't build anything yet. So he said, I need them to stop calling the office and we're going to build this. So we said, okay. I went out, I started talking to the sellers. I said, what do you need to see to run your business? What are you calling for? And I wrote down a whole list of things that they wanted to see. They wanted to be able to do everything. So we started to break that up and mock it out into little chunks, using Scrum, working with the developers to put it out there. So we kind of had this vision of where we wanted to go. I showed the vision to the sellers. They were like, yeah, that's great. Fantastic. Go ahead, just go build it. And we did. So in about 3 months, we had enough to actually launch it. And when we launched it, we were like, look, here's everything you wanted, everything you told us. You'd see some early prototypes, go at it, right? Go build this thing. Go use this thing. And this was the first time I'd ever actually put any analytics on a product at all. So it was back in the days of early Google Analytics. I put it into the product and I said, oh, I'm so excited to watch everybody use my stuff. So the first week, 100 people signed in, everybody's using it. We're ecstatic. This is going great. The next week, like 10 people log in. A month later, nobody's using it. Nobody's logging in. And I'm like, what's going on? The phone calls are starting again. They're calling the office. They're like, what's happening? Tell me what my business is doing. So I go back to the sellers and I say, hey, what's going on? Like, you told me you wanted all of these things in here. Like, why aren't you using it? And they go, what is all this stuff? Like, I know I told you that I wanted to be able to see the number of items we were selling on these days, but I don't really care, right? That's not really what I wanted to see. And you put so many things into this product that it's unusable. And I'm not getting what I really want, which is just to be able to come in and see profit and manage it easily. So now I'm going through my second crisis because I had just built everything they told me to do, right? Like I took this whole list from them and just built all these things out. And they were like, nope, we don't like it. We're not using it. And this is when I realized that we had been building and building for years and nobody had stopped to think about are we actually building the right thing? Is this the right solution for that problem? So I realized that we were stuck in what I now call the build trap. And the build trap is a place where a lot of companies get stuck. And it's when we get so focused on delivering software as quickly as possible that we don't stop to actually think about, is this the right thing to deliver? And I will tell you, like, many successful companies have been stuck here at one point or another, but it's really up to us to figure out, how do we get out? And how do we break this cycle of just building and building and not really looking at what's going to be successful? So in order to figure out how do we get out of the build trap, we first have to think about, how did we get here, right? How did we all get stuck in the build trap? And I really think it's systemic. It's not just one piece. It's not just one piece of the puzzle, but there's a lot of things that contribute to this. First, I think it's this understanding as an organization where once we start scaling, once we get out of startup phase, let's say, we start to think about the more ideas we have and the more features we have, and the faster we can code, the more money we can make. And we start to think of this as like a linear process where it's like add and add and add, code faster and faster, more money. But that's not really true, right? But what we do is we keep adding to the backlog and we just never take things away. So what happens is our products become a hodgepodge of complexity. So, when was the last time you stood in front of one of these printers and actually knew how to use it? It's because it's so full of things that we don't really need. We can't get to the stuff we actually want. So if somebody was like, let's take a copier and then put a fax machine, fax in there, a stapler, a magician, like it's too much. And that's why this is still relevant from 1999. So we're adding and adding and adding to these things, and we're not really going back and thinking about what's the right thing to build. And I do think there's a couple contributing factors to that. Now, one, when I was first exploring why we got stuck in the build trap, I thought it was really interesting. I was at Mind the Product in London, and sitting next to Jeff Patton, who's very well known in the agile world. And one of the speakers got up there, and his name's David Cancel. He's the CEO of Drift out of Boston. And he said, I'm not even going to get into agile. And everybody's like, please talk about agile. People start laughing in the audience. They're like, please talk about agile. And he goes, I hate agile. It's all points and velocity. No one talks about the customers. And I kid you not, 1,400 people stood up and applauded wildly, 1,400 product managers. And I'm looking around here going, this was not my experience with agile. So what is happening, right? What's happening? Like, I had a good experience with agile with my developers. So what happened? And what I found is that I started working with a lot of these organizations who were adopting Scrum and adopting agile processes. And that was their first introduction to product management ever. And when they started to reorganize, they thought that Scrum was going to fix all of their problems and help them ship the best software ever. And they started to look at it as the whole solution. And I saw this forever. In the last 10 years, I've seen so many organizations do this. And what they're not realizing is that Scrum doesn't really have a brain. So Scrum is really good at telling you how to work better together, how to get things out the doors, but it's not really telling you what we should be building, because Scrum is not the only thing, right? Scrum is not the only thing we need in an organization to be successful. But a lot of people mistaken it for that. And that's why you get this backlash about agile, is because they're working for organizations where people and the leaders think Scrum is it. That's it. That's all you need. So what I'm finding is that a lot of people who got introduced to product management came from the product owner role in Scrum. And especially in early days of Scrum, they weren't learning how to actually find the best ideas to build, how to really make a successful idea. So what we have to remember is that a product owner is a role that you play on a Scrum team. So let's pretend Scrum goes away one day. And I know Alex is probably panicking out there, but one day we've got a different process. Maybe somebody wants to adopt Kanban instead, right? What happens to the product owner role? It doesn't just disappear, right? You still need a product manager. It's not like somebody's not going to be figuring out what we should be building. So we got to look at it as that the product owner pieces that sometimes we learn in Scrum training is just not enough. And we need to think about what else we need as well to make a full product manager. So what does this actually look like? I like to really go back and think about product management as a value exchange and optimizing for it. So we've got customers on one side and we've got businesses on the other. And our customers have problems, wants, and needs. And our businesses have products or services that can solve those problem, wants, and needs. But it's really not until the problems are solved, the wants go away, and the needs are fulfilled that a customer realizes that value. So there is no value inherently in just shipping a product or service if it's not tied to a problem. In return, the customers give us money and the business gets business value. It's the job of the product manager to figure out what products or services we should build to maximize both customer and business value. That's really what we're looking at. And we have to remember that it's solving big problems for our customers that creates the big value for the business. And in the absence of that, we're not going to get the value we want. So in order to do this in an organization, we actually need 3 key pieces. We need a strategy that aligns us to the value that the organization wants to achieve and help us reach our vision. We need a process that allows us to figure out how to get to that strategy and deliver that value. And then we need an organization that's set up to really support that. And the first one I like to start with is really strategy, because this is the thing that a lot of people get wrong. So most organizations have a really big issue with product strategy. And I want to tell you what that looks like when we do it well. I was working for a company in New York City quite a few years ago as an interim head of product. And when I came in there, they had a very clear goal. It was to double their acquisition by the end of the year. They had done a bunch of work. They had scaled really far, but their growth rate was slowing down. Their retention was not good. They were like, if we can double our acquisition and get more people, all the work we just did on retention to help shore that up is going to help us. So they said, we got to get more people through the door, more people signing up. There was a big drop lately and we didn't know why. And the way that this meal kit worked is that you would come on, you'd sign up for a subscription, pick out your meals every week, and they send a box to your door that has all the food ingredients, all the recipes, and then you cook yourself a delicious meal. So we were trying to figure out why people were signing up. And I had the teams in a room. We were talking about running our next experiment. We had been doing some work and we just could not nail this, getting in touch with the customers to discover this stuff. And the CTO, who was from Amazon, had walked in. He was just brand new, walked in, barged into my meeting. I was not happy about this. He sits down and he goes, hey, but what is your product strategy? And I'm like, what do you mean? We're like discussing what experiment we're running next so that we can figure out what the problem is for our customers because we don't know what the problem is. And he goes, no. I want you to build like a document with every field you intend to put on the site and the content strategy so that I can build a back end. You got to like put this whole document together for me and then ship it. Which sounds a lot like what I was first doing at Capital IQ. And what he didn't really want was a strategy. He just wanted a plan. He just wanted us to say everything that was actually going to be on the site in a nice specification document. And I see that most product strategies are wish lists of features. And when you say this to people, if you ask what their product strategy is, they start rattling off all the features they're building instead of really connecting that back to value. And then what they do is they take that and then they shove it on a Gantt chart and then they make up dates for when it's really going to come out, which is impossible. And then we miss deadlines and everybody gets really mad at us. And what we're failing to recognize is that when we treat product strategy like a plan of building features, we're not actually looking at the uncertainty around that. So creating new products is full of uncertainty, right? We have to ask ourselves questions and answer them before we can commit to this specific solution. We need to know what the problem is. We need to know what aspects of that problem are bothersome for the customers. We need to know why current solutions aren't working now. We need to know what they've tried. All of these things need to be answered before we can say, yes, that's the thing we need to be building. So we can't commit to solutions without doing that research. So at the end of the day, product strategy is not a plan, but we need a system that's set up so that we can uncover that uncertainty and build the right thing. So strategy is a framework at the end of the day. And I think this is the best definition I found of it from Stephen Bungay, who wrote the book, The Art of Action. He says, strategy is a deployable decision-making framework, enabling action to achieve desired outcomes, constrained by current capabilities and coherently aligned to the existing context. That is a mouthful for saying strategy is a deployable decision-making framework. That means that I can communicate it and the people I communicate it to can make decisions in light of that framework. It enables action to achieve desired outcomes. That means that when I tell you my strategy, you can actually act on it. It allows you to take the next step. And it's aligned towards outcomes, right? Are things that we want to achieve for value. It's constrained by current capabilities. We're only doing what we can do now. or what is possible to do in the near future. And it's coherently aligned to existing context where we are today. So what does this actually look like in an organization? I find that there's about 4-ish levels. So if you're one product line, it's probably going to look something like this. It does get a little more complicated with portfolios, but it follows the same rule. First, we start with a vision for the company, and that's where do we want to be in 5 to 10 years? This is our value for our customers, our position in the market. It's what our business looks like. And this should not be just a statement that's like, be the best bank. What's that mean? Right? Like, what's it mean to be the best bank? How do we want to do it? Who do we want to target? How is it different than our competitors? Once the leaders set that, then they set the strategic intents. And strategic intents are business challenges standing in the way of us reaching our vision. And you do a lot of research and a lot of math to figure out which business challenges you should be doing. So this is stuff like, we want to expand into a new market to solve these problems for that market, right? Or we want to expand geographically, or we want to go up market into the enterprise because maybe we saw that some of the enterprises are starting to use our product now and it can solve problems for them. So it's well reasoned and it's prioritized business challenges. And I like to say that you can't have more than 3. Organizations that have more than 3 of these are usually spread way too thin. So we want to keep it tight and we want to make sure there's only a few of them. Then what we do is start to look at our product portfolio. And then we say, what problems can we address to tackle the challenge from a product perspective? So how can we use software to solve that problem? What are the big problems that we have to solve for our customers? And those become product initiatives. And that's set usually by your directors of product or your heads of product. So people who are managing the whole product part. Then we have our options, which is what the team set. Sometimes people call these epics, for example. But these are what are the different ways I can address the problem to reach my goal. And the reason I like to call them options instead of epics or a different language is because this should really be something that allows you to think about what's the right thing to solve. And when we first start out solving, we won't know what this looks like until we experiment, until we figure out what to build. So options keeps us fresh. It means that there's multiple solutions usually to solving that problem. So when the CTO came in and said, what is your product strategy? I did not just write a big specification document. Instead, we took a couple steps back and started to put the strategy together. We had done a lot of work as an organization to first figure out what the vision was going to be and how they wanted to compete, because there was a lot of meal kits on the market. And they came up with, in the 5 years, our company will be the meal kit with the most choices and convenience in the market. So that's how they were going to differentiate. They did not want to have limited choices, and they did not want to have it impossible for you to go and get your stuff. They wanted it so that if you went to a grocery store, you could buy the meal kit. If you wanted delivered, you can buy the meal kit, something that was convenient. So that's what they were doubling down on. Our strategic intent, we knew, was doubling acquisition of new customers and maintaining retention. And we had to do that by the end of 2016. So your leaders should really be providing your vision, goals, and guardrails. That's what they're doing. So we've got our vision, we got our goals. Guardrails are basically telling us we want to be able to solve these problems, but not in this way. For example, like we couldn't lower the price of our product. That was a guardrail. And that's good because it constrains us enough so that we can explore different options within that. Now, when you put this all together, what this does is it promotes alignment. And in Agile, we love to talk about autonomous teams, but you can't have autonomous teams without alignment. Otherwise, teams just go all in different directions and they're running like crazy and they're working 80 hours a week, but nothing is getting accomplished. Nothing is really coming back to the business goals. So our first step to escape the build trap is to drive high alignment through a good strategy framework that allows teams to make decisions. And once we do that, now we have to figure out what it is that we want to build. So we can't just set this product strategy in a room in November in 1 week, like a lot of people do. That doesn't work, right? We want it to actually merge from doing good experimentation. And in order to do that, we need a process that supports experimentation. So when I first came into this company, we actually had a lot of ideas of what could solve this problem of acquisition. We had the prices too high. We should lower it. But like I said, that was a guardrail. We were not going to be able to maintain profitability if we were to lower that. The photos are not enticing. There was a picture of a steak on the website and people thought it was turning people off. Don't know why. We said, okay, we could test photos. Sure. We should be offering sign-up gifts. The head of marketing really wanted to put these like chef's cutting knives into the boxes as a free gift when people signed up. And I thought that was really dangerous to just be shipping like knives everywhere. So I said, maybe we should explore other options, but he really loved sign up gifts. He's like, let's just bribe them to sign up. This will be great. And then also we need to rebrand the sign up funnel to the new design. They had done a big redesign on the site. The sign up funnel looked a little old. They wanted to move it into flat design and all these new UI patterns. That was one. But the problem with these is that none of this tells me actually what the problem is, right? These are solutions to something that we don't know yet. We don't know what the problem is. So we took a couple steps back and started to analyze what was happening with our customers. And we found that a lot of people were making it to the site. Tons of people made it to the site. So marketing wasn't the issue. They got there. They got into the sign up funnel and they fell off on this address step. They knew the price, they chose their meals, and then they got to putting in their address and they fell off. Really weird. That I came from e-commerce, that's weird. Like this does not normally happen. So we started to do some benchmark surveys and figure out that actually, if we can increase conversion rate past that step and figure out what's going on, we can get really, really close to our acquisition goals. So we set that as our product initiative. We need to increase the conversion rate across all of our platforms, but the question was how? And we weren't done with our product initiative until we figured out what we were going to do to get that metric up. So we started to break down what our obstacles were. And our first obstacle was we don't understand why people are leaving. So we weren't capturing their email addresses and we couldn't follow up with the people who left. We're a B2C company, right? We tried putting email addresses as a first step, tanked conversion, plummeted, not good. Took that off very quickly. So we're trying to figure out how do we get in touch with customers. We had done a bunch of usability tests. They were fine. Everybody could figure out what to do. So we did not know what was going on. Now, we couldn't figure out how to reach these people. And then one day my developer comes up to me and he says, Melissa, I found this tool called Qualaroo. And what it does is that when people are going towards the back button, it says, what's stopping you from signing up today? Or when they go to exit out. I said, oh, that's fantastic. He's like, yeah, I could put it up in like an hour. Great. Put that up there. But maybe we should do like a multiple choice. What do you think? Like, I don't know if we should just put like an open text button. He said, well, let's throw it up there and we could find out. I could change it in like 3 seconds if we want to do multiple choice. So I said, okay. Within 1 week, we had 3,000 responses. And in a month, we had tens of thousands of responses. And nobody said they wanted a chef's knife. They said, I cannot find your food menu. I have no idea what food you serve. It's the most basic thing for like a meal kit delivery company, right? Don't know where the menu is. I got stuck in here looking for the menu. And because we left it open-ended, I got a lot of really good context about these questions. What's in the box? Does it come with salt? Do I need to get eggs? How does this actually work? I've never done this with a meal kit before. People said the price is too high, but the way they worded it was, I don't understand why you cost more than your competitors. So it's more of a value realization thing. And we had good reasons to why we cost more, but we were not explaining them. So looking at this whole thing, we realized that people just don't know what we're doing on the site, right? Like they have no idea what we're selling. So our product initiative became to create a clearer experience for our customers to increase the conversion rate across all our platforms. So we knew that if we could nail that, it's probably going to get the right people in there. Our first obstacle here was people couldn't find the menu. We wanted to start with that highest one. It was 33% of people who were leaving because of that. And we were able to quantify how much money that would bring us in if we solved this problem. So with that, we knew the menu was on the site, but it was hidden under this hamburger button up on the top. We had just done a huge redesign and they spent something like 9 months on this before I walked in, redesigning the site into flat design, new branding, all these new things. And they buried all the information about the product. So the navigation was really hard. It was hard to find the information about this product anywhere. So we ran an experiment and I said, let's try to expand this menu. We do have a menus page and we don't have many other pages because it's a very long scroll, but let's just put menus up there, FAQs and help, A/B test it and see what happens. We almost doubled our acquisition just on that small test. And we saw with this good results that we needed to redesign the site and actually step through it. So we went back and we started to address piece by piece what all those issues were that came through that survey. We put out a menus page. We put better navigation out. We explained how it worked. We said, why should you choose us over your competitors? And we rolled this out piece by piece. And by doing that, we were able to actually double our acquisition. So those became our options, the expanded navigation, the new ways to get around the site, better explanations on each page, and those different designs. And by doing that, they doubled the acquisition, they met their goals, and they actually had a really nice exit to a grocery chain in the United States, which was fantastic for meal kits because a lot of them went out of business right after this. So to escape the build trap, we need to use the right processes and tools at the right time. That's what's important. So I see a lot of people gravitate towards these really fun tools like prototype all the things or A/B test everything or, like do this. The problem is that if you're not using it in the right context, if we had just done that specification document, said what that content would be, for example, you're not going to win. So tools are useless unless you use them correctly. And you really need to know the meaning behind why you're using each tool. That's why I like to teach something called the product kata. And the product kata is based off Toyota kata. And what it is a systematic scientific way to learn and build better products. Now, we just stepped through the product kata, as I showed you through that example. We started with our company goal. We broke it down into the smaller goal once we realized that conversion was the problem. We asked ourselves what users were doing now, use that survey tool to get out there and learn it. And we kept iterating until we actually reached our goal. So the product kata really puts you into a great perspective of trying to understand what problem are we addressing right now and what's my right tool to use. And it breaks down your big goals into smaller goals so that you can iterate your way and test your way through getting to great product strategy. So what this really promotes, though, at the end of the day is learning. And learning is the thing that reduces uncertainty. Learning is what's going to make us successful. So in order to learn, we need to actually build a good system of discovery and delivery in our organizations. So we need to be learning about our customers, delivering on that, and then measuring our progress. So we need an organization that's set up well to do that. So let's go back and talk about Agile again for a minute. So again, when I heard this about Agile, I was shocked because that wasn't my experience with how to use it. And when I was brought into Agile, I learned about the principles, and I learned that the first thing was our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software. If that's a tenet of Agile, how did we get so far away from it in certain parts of organizations, in certain ways that people have adopted it? We have to ask ourselves again, how did we get here? Like, we're planning, we're not experimenting. We're treating our colleagues sometimes as customers and getting internal suggestions for products instead of doing the user research. Sometimes we go a week in November and just dictate all the things we want to build next year with no data and no research. So we're focusing really internally and we get stuck in this build trap. Why? I think it's because we focus more on doing the process right than building the right things sometimes. And you can get into this trap pretty easily in organizations by the way that we measure success. Why do we do this? It's really easy to check a box and say, hey, yeah, I built a roadmap. I wrote a user story. I did Scrum, right? Like I did my meetings. It's actually hard to measure if you did the right thing because then we have to measure outcomes. And outcomes sometimes take a long time to measure. Sometimes they're lagging indicators, right? They're things that take a week or a month or in the context of strategic intent, sometimes a year or two to measure results. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be measuring them. Outputs are easy to measure. And so what we end up doing is we build and we launch with no measures of success. So all of our product development teams become a conveyor belt, just putting things out there and not actually checking ourselves and saying, is this making a difference for our business? And one of the issues that we have with that is because leaders are not really putting the visions and the strategic intents out there to prioritize where we should be going. And if we don't have a good framework for this in the organization, if we're not really focusing on what those outcomes are on those strategic intents and putting them back into what the teams are doing for product, that's going to focus us more on outputs as a measure of success instead of outcomes. So we need to build a culture that allows us to really build these frameworks, navigate this uncertainty, and look at outcomes. So that's the last piece of escaping the build trap. is to create a product-led organization that has policies and practices needed to navigate uncertainty and make strategic decisions that lead to measurable success. So good product organizations that look like this, they're doing these things. They're growing through software products rather than unrepeatable services. They're ruthlessly focused on solving customers and users' problems to drive business value. They're oriented around outcomes instead of outputs. They're experimental by nature and driven by continuous improvement. And they're a place where leadership enables empowered decision-making throughout the levels and doesn't just dictate down what to build. So if you have an organization that's set up that way, you've got a good strategy framework that's set out to really orient you towards those outcomes, and you got a process that lets you navigate uncertainty. At the end of the day, escaping the build trap really comes down to people, because it's up to us to make the effort to make these changes, right? And I will tell you right now, it's really comfortable to stay in the build trap. It's a cozy, familiar place. And sometimes it's much easier to do that. But it's up to us to actually pick up our heads and ask questions and figure out which way we should be going and challenge those assumptions. So thank you very much. If you do want the slides, you can go to productslabs.com/buildtrap. And I do have the slides there if you sign up. And again, Escaping the Build Trap is out in Spanish now. That is, I should have changed this for the Spanish version, but it's called, Alex, say it because I'm not going to say it correctly. How do you say the name?
Escapa de la Trampa del Desarrollo.
Okay, cool. So I hope you enjoyed that. We're going to do, if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to, yeah, good. We got some questions. I'm happy to answer questions, and I hope you enjoy the book.
Okay. Do you want to read them, or may I read them for you?
I'll read them. That's fine. Let's see. Question, how, Rodrigo, do you want to ask your question or you want me to read it? How accurate could be lean startup method for product experimentation and business model canvas for product market fit? Do you watch in real cases in the market? As you said, being in the right situation, also service design for product discovery. So Rodrigo, are you asking about how good is a lean startup method for product experimentation? Is that the gist of it in the business model canvas? Or is it more generally, how do you come up with what to build? I'll take this if you're not there. I think the lean startup is a great method for discovering what to build. Now, the thing with the lean startup method, and I got into this whole thing because I started using lean startup in my work as a product manager back at Open Sky. So when we did that dashboard, we actually went back for those sellers. We actually went back and used a lot of lean startup techniques to make it better, and we launched it really well. But that was my first foray into that. What is different about lean startup method and product experimentation inside a company is that usually your goals are already dictated out where you're going towards. So for example, with a startup, your first goal when you're launching is to do acquisition, and then it will move on to retention. That is the only goal. So like when you're looking at this, it's acquisition for a new product line as well. But the experimentation is very important here. You can use a lot of the same factors in your organization. It depends if you're B2C or B2B, what kind of lean startup methods you're going to be using or what kind of experimentation. So for example, in a B2B organization, if you have, let's say you're in healthcare, you're in banking, there's high risk. You're not going to be A/B testing things. Like that's not the right thing for that. It also doesn't give you enough traffic. Usually what you're going to be doing is putting feature flags on stuff, breaking people down into alpha and beta testers, doing a lot of prototyping. Then you're going to also be feature flagging it where you can introduce maybe some small, not fully fleshed out features to certain groups in smaller amounts so they can test it, give you feedback, and you can iterate on it before it's live for everybody. So that's like one way to do product experimentation in B2Bs. In B2C, you do have the ability, if you have enough traffic, to do some things like A/B testing, like I talked about, but there's a lot of other things you could do. You could do concierge testing. Business model canvas is fantastic for figuring out product market fit. It's a great guideline for that too. You can also watch real cases in the market. A lot of this too is figuring out how do you apply these tools so that they work for you in your context. So what I would encourage you to do is look at every tool and understand why that tool works and what context people usually use it in. For example, people usually use lean startup methodology in a startup context from scratch. think about what needs to change if you're at a larger organization, right? And don't feel bad about like tweaking these methods to work for you. You want to ask your question, Alex?
Yeah. I'm talking often to product owners who feel trapped because they claim that management are not granting them rights to take decisions or deciding on the strategy of products, while developers maybe they are not they don't have a big group, or they don't have all the capabilities or whatever, and they are not stepping up and being proactive. So they need to keep writing specifications, so they don't have time to really get into the business decisions. So what would you advise them to do?
Yeah. That's it's a common thing. I think you nailed it right there. There's two pieces here, like the product. So what the product owners can do with what they're building is go and ask questions to the leadership. So what they should be doing is, if they hand them something to build, be like, fantastic, we're going to build it. Sounds good. Can you tell me why we're building this? Like, what was the decision-making method to get here? In order to build it really well, it would be so helpful for me to have some context, because I want to make sure that I'm building you the best version of this possible, right? Can you tell me, like, if we build it and we launch it, what do you want to see change? What kind of user behavior changes? What kind of goals change? What kind of metrics change? So that I know that we're designing it in the right way for you, right? And once you get that, you're going to start to walk them towards the outcome. So a lot of times they come and they dictate the solution. And the more you ask the questions, you can figure out what the outcome is. Then I go back, typically I tell them to go back and figure out, is that the right solution for that outcome, for that problem that they think is there? And do a little research, right? Like, go out, do some work to really figure out if that's going to work. And if you can come back with data and alter the solution, a lot of times they're very receptive to it. Leaders are pretty receptive to it. And especially if you have the context in the background and you can explain why. So that's what I encourage for the product owners on that side. On the developer side, though, it's hard for the product managers to go do all that work if the developers don't want to step up and be proactive. And this is where I really think there's like where we get into trouble with some of the work that comes out of companies. And I'm not blaming this on Scrum. What I've seen is people fall into this mode where the developers expect the product owners to spec out every single little detail, and they stop thinking for themselves. It's like, why are we paying you what we're paying you if you don't want to think a little bit, right? So two sides of that. One, the product owners need to make sure they're empowering the developers to fill in the gaps. Two, I don't think we should be writing user stories that are task related. I'm sure you'll agree with me, Alex, on that. Like, it shouldn't be like, put this button in this thing, right? It should be, as a user, I want to accomplish these things, right? The stuff that's required, the stuff that's going to make a difference for there. And as a design and development team, if the designers and the developers are partnering well together, which they should be working hand in hand, they should be able to figure out most of that solution, right? They should be able to do a lot of filling in the gaps there if we can know high level what we want. And when I see that working well together, and the product owners and the product managers are able to come up a little bit and make sure we're building the right thing and do the data analysis and the and figuring out, like, do we have the right requirements in here? Is this the right thing that's going to solve the problem? That's going to free them up to actually be a little more strategic and forward thinking. So really, I look at the product manager job and the product owner job as like prioritization. And in order to prioritize, you do need to know, what the requirements are, what's going to make a difference there, but also what the data is. Like, when we ship this chunk of stuff, what are we going to get at the end of the day? And that does take a bunch of research to do. So I think that, like, it comes from two parts. It's one, like, empowering the developers to make decisions in the absence of a product manager being there in line with the good context. Now, I'll say part two. This actually happened to me at Athena Health. They did a big agile transformation, went to Scrum, and one of the teams was in exactly the same situation you're talking about here, Alex. And like, the product owner was like, I have no time to go do research. I have no time to do this because the developers won't stop asking me questions all day long. And I said, okay, what context are you building with the developers before you actually get started? And what they weren't doing is they were just continuously sprinting always, and they never stopped. They stopped once like once a quarter, actually once every 3 times a year, because we had 3 release cycles, to basically say, hey, what we should be building. And they never built a vision. They never built context about what they're building, and they never like aligned people around where it was going. And without that context, nobody knew what they should be building. So they were building all these small things, right, that needed questions answered every day because there was no context about what the big thing was or what the vision was or where we were going. And that's actually one of the biggest things I've seen help developers and product managers get out of that question asking 40-hour a week type thing, is building that context. So I think that can help too. Cool. Anna, how do you skip the build trap when the executive team puts you there? Yeah. So it's a good question. And it's common. I think the big stuff here is the executive team sometimes doesn't realize. It's hard to say this when you get frustrated at them, but like, one, let's empathize with the executive team for a minute. Here's something that I learned working with a lot of CEOs, and I mostly work with executive teams now. A lot of them have never done this before. So they don't know what they should be doing, and they don't know what to give to you. I usually come in and rewrite strategies for people now because they've never written a strategy before. I usually come in and teach them how to do a strategy framework because they've never done one before, right? And in a lot of organizations, that's the case. And if you're in a scale up with a founder, I guarantee you that's the case. If you're in a startup with a founder-led startup or a scale up or anything like that, that person, a lot of times they've never been a CEO, they've never been a product leader before, they don't know what they should be doing. So what do? They come to you with solutions, right? And that's what's going to happen because they know, they go, build me this, build me that. That's what I should be telling my team. So part of this is like understanding that sometimes this isn't from like a bad place. It's from they don't know any better place. And when they don't know any better, they're just going to be like, hey, go build these things. So what you can do is the best question you can ask. And I said this a little bit before, but this has been like life-changing, I think, for a lot of people, is don't get really dismissive of their ideas when they come to you with a shiny new initiative. The worst thing you can do is be like, oh my God, again, like you're giving me solutions again. It's going to turn them off and they're going to get really mad at you. Instead, say, great, let's sit down and discuss this so that we can actually do it well. What's the problem we're trying to solve here from our customers? Who is this for, right? And then when we release this, what are the metrics that you want to measure for success? What do you think success will look like? Because I want to make sure I build this right? So you sound like you're kind of on their page. When you start that conversation, what happens is people start to think through why they're doing the things they're doing. And it might be gradual and it might be slow, but one, you're going to get context that you didn't have before. I've had a lot of like CEOs in my life just come to tell me what to build, and I didn't have the context. And what they were saying was really smart in hindsight. But at the time I was frustrated and I was mad because I just thought they were dictating solutions and I didn't know why. But they were not explaining their strategies to me. So what you want to do is you want to get that strategy out and you want to see if it's connected to a strategy. And if it's not connected to a strategy, now you're opening yourself up to have a conversation, right? Now you're opening yourself up to go get some research, poke holes and see if it's the right thing to build. And if it's the right thing to build, like who cares where the idea came from? Just do it. If it's not the right thing to build, now we say, hey, I know this is what you wanted to change, but I did these experiments and it's not looking like this is going to make a difference, but I did find this alternative. And this alternative could be something really good for us. Look at all this data, right? And you present them with other options. And if you can navigate it like that, you can usually get them to turn around. So the biggest thing is don't be dismissive, just be really excited about what they're building and then go do your own work. Like don't ask for permission, just go out there and do the experiment, do the research yourself and make sure that you're going to build it in the right way and it's the right way to go. That's what I would really look at. Do you think it's a good idea to combine the use of Scrum and Kanban? I don't love to comment on these processes. I'll let Alex comment on that one later for you. But I have had very good success using Kanban. I've had very good success using Scrum. And I think at the end of the day, it's like what works for your team. What works for your team and what's going to get it done, right? And I think if you remember that, like the processes here are like a means to an end, not the whole point of what you do on a day-to-day basis, you're going to choose the right ones for yourself. So we started with like a 2-week sprint cycle in OpenSky, like I was telling you about, and we went down to like a 1 week and then we stopped sprinting And we just started, because of the nature of the products we were doing, we went down to a smaller little like experimentation team, and we were putting experiments out like every week or every 3 days. And then we just started talking. And the more we talked to each other, the more we found that we didn't need super specific guidelines or rules of how we worked. We just were able to get it done ourselves. So I don't think there's a perfect way to work for everybody. I think it's more about, what do you need right now? And what does your organization need? And sometimes you need more structure when you're first starting out and you don't know what to do. And I think this is a learning method for a lot of people out there. Cause like I also teach MBA students and other people out there who've never done product management before. The more structure you can follow at the beginning, the easier it is for you to learn. Sometimes you need a path, you need somebody to tell you what to do. But what you should be doing is, while you're learning that, think about why it's working, what's not working. Why did I do this? Was that the right thing to do at this time? You have to question it, right? And poke at it so that you understand the things that you're doing. And once you do that, now you start to move them, right? And now you start to mold them and get them to work for you. And that's how you learn, and that's how you grow. But when you're just starting out, it's really hard to have no structure whatsoever. So structure is really good at the beginning, but you have to question why it works and understand that, and then you'll be able to flex it with what you need. Cool. What else? How can you convince the business leaders to check the process when they're almost sure about what they want to build? Like the example of the steak photo. Yeah, it's, again, questions. I think I answered that one, but like, just question everything. But like, again, don't be dismissive. The worst thing you could do, and I've been very dismissive to executives, so please take this from my personal experience being yelled at for much of my early career, because I was a hothead who thought I knew better than all the CEOs that I worked with. They hate it when you just tell them they're wrong, right? So instead you get excited and you just ask a lot of questions because you act excited. And if you act excited and ask a bunch of questions, they're going to give you the information that you want, right? And then you can go around and find the data that you need to go back and challenge the assumptions in a nice way, but they'll trust you more if you're not dismissive. How to measure right and lightweight to measure small changes towards the organization and tangible as improve a build process, find a bug early. So how do we measure lightweight, small changes towards, towards where we're going, I'm getting. When you're looking, one of the things too about strategy that scales is that, like I said, with stuff like strategic intents, they're lagging indicators. So they're going to basically be things that happen over a year or 2 years to measure. You can usually get good information that you're on the right track though. And that's what those options goals are and what those product initiatives goals are. So for example, an option goal might be about usage or adoption. So for example, if you are trying to fix something in a workflow because you discovered that it was broken for somebody, or you're building something that's like a CSV export into Excel from a thing, you want to look at usage, right? And what you did is you did the research basically to say that people aren't using our feature because it doesn't have this option. This is what they're doing in their own workflow. We should add that in, right? Now I know that when I go to put that initiative out there, I'm going to measure it by how many people are using it, how they're utilizing it, how many people stay. And then that is a leading indicator to retention, right? How many people stay with us, if they leave, go that place. So that's what we really want to do, is we want to draw a parallel between what's happening with the users back to why they're leaving, right? And if you keep asking yourself why all the way down, you can start to connect all those dots all the way back up. So that's how you start to measure the small changes, but know that they're going to go to the big changes, is if you deeply understand the problem behind why you're building all those small changes and what they ladder up to. So that's what I would really look at. Let's see what else. Oh, in a really mature product. Does that answer your question, Carlos? Or did I not answer it? I can't see him. Okay. Let's go to the next one. How do you make exec teams realize the value of product designers when they see them as coloring team? That's so true. That happens all the time. And they would refuse to invest in one. Do you think that a product team can still be successful without product designers? Speaking about a product that should be self-explanatory for B2C, I think product designers are incredibly important. I was a hybrid product manager, product designer for a long time. So my first 5 years of work, I did a lot of UX myself, and I did not have a UX team. Then I learned they were two different things. I did not know there was a difference before. And I do think if you are in this situation, one of the best things that you could do as a product manager is learn some UX skills. You don't need to go crazy. If you're interested, we do have a course that's UX design for product managers in this situation at productinstitute.com. It's one of our small courses. And if you can learn some of those things, it's gonna make it a lot better. Now, what you can do for execs, and I work on this a lot, almost like a lot of the problems that I see when I come into organizations, I do like a lot of board roles now and board advisory for like scale up companies. And one of the biggest issues is almost always their user experience. And it might look pretty, but it's like not intuitive, right? Or it doesn't really go together well. Sometimes it doesn't look pretty at all. And what I do to show them why they should invest in product design or why they should be doing that is like showing them how, one, recording usability tests and showing people, show the developers. Like I have done this for a ton of CEOs. I've recorded people using their product and show them where they can't use it or why it's confusing. That's a great way to get them to invest in a product designer very quickly. It works every single time. Another one is if you could show the pain points coming from user research back to them and how it relates to design. That's one. If you see that there's an issue with your product, like people are dropping off or people are leaving or something like that, and you can relate it back to UX design, you go out, do that user research, you tie it back there. That's where they start to look at that. But really it comes from like the customer feedback. I've put together little like short segments of people struggling with products in like a short little 5-minute video for executives before. And they've been like, oh my God. And they hired like a UX designer the next month. They were like, okay, I get it. They want to make money, right? Like at the end of the day, they want to make money. They just don't know better, right? Like, again, it's like, it's kind of sad to say, but like sometimes the executives have never done this before. And it's just kind of like educating them along the way. And you have to show them. Showing them is so much better, easier than I think trying to tell them, right? Cool. What else? Different concepts. We'll do one more and then we'll go. During your speech, some kind of different concepts came to my mind. It is okay as a summary of the session. I mean, ideas of product development should be a combination of business analysis. Yeah. Keeping the development project on track. There is some project management always involved with this. And building it in an agile framework and continue experimenting, growth hacking. I think one of the things I'd say is that the goal to doing this really well is trying to connect. I look at it this way from like a 20-foot lens. We choose the right customer problems to solve by looking at what are the business's challenges that we need to look. So think of the business challenge part as a lens of which problem should I solve now versus later. And that's how we think about prioritizing. And then what we're really doing is solving those problems in scalable way through software. And in order to do that, you need to do business analysis to figure out what problems to solve, right? You need to do experimentation to figure out if it's the right solution. And then you do need a process, some kind of good agile framework to allow yourself to do that work to get to the right solution. So that's really what we're looking at from a high level with product management. But I think that is our time. So again, if you enjoyed this, please go buy our Spanish version of the book. It is out there all over on Amazon. I just discounted the paperback $5 for you today too, so you can get it for a little cheaper. But if you have any more questions, I do a podcast called the Product Thinking Podcast. I'll put it down here too. And if you go to this link that I'm putting in the chat, dearmelissa.com, I answer questions like this every 2 weeks. And if you leave me a question there, I'll answer it on one of the next podcasts. But there's a lot of questions I've been answered too that might help.